Most Canadians don't believe that Liberal leader Mark Carney would balance the budget if he's elected Prime Minister.
The recent landmark ruling on the legal definition of a woman in the UK has brought renewed attention to Canada's own laws on the matter.
Liberal leader Mark Carney promoted a nuclear company owned by Brookfield Asset Management while discussing potential energy investments. Hello Canada, it's Tuesday, April 22nd, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Geoff Knight.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. While Liberal leader Mark Carney touts himself as a competent economic manager, a majority of Canadians are doubtful that a Liberal government under his leadership would restore order to the federal government's finances. In a poll conducted by Leger, 65% of decided Canadians indicated that they are skeptical that a Carney government would balance the federal government's operational budget. Only 35% say they are confident in his ability to achieve this goal. During Carney's campaign for the Liberal leadership, the former central banker promised that he would split the federal government's budget in two, divided into the operating and capital budget. Carney promised to balance the operating budget in 3 years while running deficits in the capital budget to, quote, catalyze investment. Carney said, quote, Canadians deserve a government that works for you, a government that spends less and invests more. However, as the poll commissioned by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation indicates, Canadians are skeptical that a Carney government would achieve this objective, with those living in the prairies and Alberta more skeptical than the national average. In a poll conducted by Angus Reid in early April, nearly 50% of Canadians said they wanted the federal government to focus on balancing the budget, even if that requires cutting social programs, while the other half preferred expanding social programs, even if it means continued deficit spending. Just over a quarter of voters who indicated that they will be voting Liberal in the federal election said that balancing the budget was a priority. True North reached out to the Liberal Party for comment, but no response was given. So, Geoff, most Canadians will know that Carney recently unveiled his costed platform, but how much more debt can Canadians expect to take on should the Liberals win?
Yeah, Isaac, Mark Carney's costed platform, as unveiled this month, lays out a clear picture of the debt Canadians could expect under a Liberal government. According to a CBC News report on April 20th, the Liberals are promising $130 billion in new measures over the next 4 years, which, when combined with existing spending, will add $225 billion to the federal debt. That's a huge increase, especially considering the skepticism already shown in the Leger poll, where 65% of Canadians doubt Carney can balance the operational budget. The platform projects an annual deficit of $62.3 billion in 2025 to 26, or 1.96% of GDP, dropping slightly to $60 billion the following year with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 1.83%. Carney's plan to split the budget, balancing the operating side in 3 years while running deficits on the capital side to catalyze investment, is supposed to justify this, but the numbers are stark. The Liberals' own projections under Trudeau had the deficit at $131.4 billion over 4 years. Carney's plan nearly doubles that burden. So if the Liberals win, Canadians are looking at $225 billion more in debt over 4 years, a steep price for his promises, especially when only 35% of polled Canadians trust him to manage the finances effectively.
And just quickly, for those of you who don't know, I'm kind of a financial nerd, so I was reading the budget documents, and I just wanted to quickly mention that that $62 billion deficit is the existing spending plus the new measures minus the revenue that Carney expects from the tariff war. So the tariffs are actually helping him on the ledger, because without the tariffs, instead of $62 billion deficit, it would be an $82 billion deficit, because in that first year, they're expecting $20 billion in revenue from tariff measures.
The United Kingdom's top court has ruled that the legal definition of a woman is based on biological sex, setting off a stark contrast with Canada's charter-backed policy that identifies self-described gender identity as a protected group, even in sex-segregated spaces. In a unanimous decision, the UK Supreme Court ruled that the term woman in anti-discrimination law applies only to biological females, excluding transgender individuals from spaces like change rooms, hospital wards, and sports teams when those facilities are designated for women. Conversely, Bill C-16, introduced in 2016 by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, added gender identity and gender expression as protected grounds under the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code. Correctional Service Canada has confirmed it places inmates in facilities based on their gender identity, stating it applies fair and impartial decision-making methods to meet the needs of transgender offenders. Director of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith, said, quote, "Everyone knows what sex is, and you can't change it. It's common sense, basic common sense, and the fact that we have been down a rabbit hole where people have tried to deny science, and hopefully this will now see us back to reality." The case challenged a 2018 Scottish law that required women to make up at least 50% of public board members, where the government had counted transgender women with gender recognition certificates as part of the quota. The Supreme Court ruled that doing so would create heterogeneous groupings and conflict with the Equality Act, which defines sex based on biology. Liberal leader Mark Carney offered a muddled response when True North journalist Alex Zoltan recently asked whether biological women should have the right to access spaces without biological males, including in sports, change rooms, washrooms, prisons, and homeless shelters. So, Isaac, how did Carney respond to True North's questions during the debate?
Yeah, Jeff. So True North's Alex Zoltan actually got the last question in Carney's Q&A, which was only the fourth question, two being asked in French before him and one in English. And as you said, he asked how many genders there were, which Carney replied, quote, "In terms of sex, there are two," which might have not sat well with some extreme leftists. But Alex followed up, as you said, asking whether biological women had a right to their own spaces, sports, change rooms, prisons, and homeless shelters. And Carney dodged the question. He said, quote, "This is Canada. That as a general objective, yes, we work where we value all Canadians for who they are and will continue to do so." And interestingly, Carney actually said and ah about the same number of times, if not more, than the other words used in that sentence, which is a recurring theme, it seems, for Carney when he's posed questions for which he's unprepared. Juno News's Cian Bexty also got a question. In fact, he was the first person to ask a question in the English line. He asked Carney whether he thought Justin Trudeau was a good prime minister. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Carney aligned himself with Trudeau and said they had the same values. He said the difference between them was that Carney would put more emphasis on the economy. Of course, we now know that Carney is planning to put Canada into more debt than Trudeau would have, so not sure whether that point is entirely true. Carney also dodged Cian's question on how he reconciles with having the same MPs as the Trudeau government, but promising to be different. Liberal leader Mark Carney has repeatedly claimed to have no conflicts of interest while also promoting a company owned by Brookfield Asset Management during the French leadership debate. While praising the benefits of nuclear energy during the French debate, Carney mentioned the Westinghouse Electric Company as a viable option. The American nuclear power company, headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, was procured by Brookfield under Carney's tenure as co-chair and remains profitable for the firm, which Carney held $6.8 million in options as of December 31st. Carney said, quote, "We have a great advantage here in Canada. We have uranium. That's one of the advantages. We have major nuclear companies including Candu, Westinghouse, and Cameco." Carney went on to begin discussing the benefits of small modular nuclear reactor technology, another Westinghouse pursuit, before being interrupted. Carney has refused to disclose his assets amid mounting pressure from media, his political opponents, and the vast majority of Canadians who want him to prove that his potential leadership won't be swayed by conflicts of interest. Carney maintains that he doesn't have any conflicts, but has also made it clear that he won't disclose his assets until after the election concludes, even interrupting a reporter to say, "What possible conflict would I have?" However, signs that such conflicts may exist are already beginning to appear as Brookfield formed a partnership with Cameco to acquire Westinghouse in 2023 under Carney's direction. His former company now owns 51% of Westinghouse, while Cameco has the remaining 40%. So, Jeff, are there other companies owned by Brookfield that could benefit from Carney's policies?
Yeah, Isaac, Mark Carney's ties to Brookfield Asset Management raise legitimate questions about other companies in their portfolio, especially given his reluctance to disclose his assets. Beyond Westinghouse, which he name-dropped during the French debate, Brookfield has staked in several firms that align closely with Carney's policy priorities. Brookfield Renewable Partners, a major player in their portfolio, stands to gain from Carney's heavy push for green energy. According to a Brookfield press conference from March 2023, this subsidiary manages nearly 46,000 megawatts of renewable capacity, hydro, wind, and solar across 5 continents. Carney's platform, as outlined in a Liberal Party statement on April 15th, emphasizes expanding renewable energy infrastructure, including tax incentives for solar and wind projects. Brookfield Renewable, with its $20 billion in assets under management as of late 2024, could see a direct boost from such policies. Another example is Urban Grid, a US-based solar developer fully acquired by Brookfield in 2022. A company update from January 2025 notes Urban Grid has a pipeline of 20,000 megawatts of utility-scale solar and storage capacity. Carney's pledge to catalyze investment in clean energy through a capital budget deficit, as mentioned in his April 2025 costed platform, could funnel federal support towards solar projects, potentially benefiting Urban Grid's expansion in Canada, where Brookfield has been eyeing growth. Then there's XELIO, a Spanish solar developer where Brookfield bought the remaining 50% stake in March 2023, valued at $2 billion. XELIO's focus on utility-scale solar aligns with Carney's green agenda, and any federal push for international partnerships in renewables could pad their bottom line. With Carney holding $6.8 million in Brookfield options as of December 31st, 2024, likely worth over $20 million Canadian now, given the stock's rise to 86.26 Canadian dollars in early 2025. These connections look like potential conflicts waiting to happen, especially since he's dodging transparency until after the election.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating.